Hey guys, welcome to Flite Test. I'm Austin.
And I'm Alex.
And today we are looking at the DJI Spark.
DJI Spark, yeah, you remember that drone that came out like a couple months ago that we never did a video on? Well,
Here it is.
We've had it since it came out, and we've actually been using it a lot, and we decided to finally do a video, kind of like a roundup of our experiences so far with it. And also, a lot's changed, because when the Spark came out initially, it was pretty well received. It did have a minor few bugs, nothing major with things like gesture control and stuff like that, but they've actually come out with a couple updates since, which supposedly have improved that.
Yeah, so I think that it's just good just overall just to spend some time with something which we don't always get to do before we do a review on something. But with this in particular, we have. So one of the reasons that we had trouble kind of figuring out how to approach this review is we were trying to figure out who the DJI Spark is for. Like what kind of consumer buys the Spark versus a Phantom or a Mavic or anything else in the DJI lineup. So what's your take on that?
So we obviously have and we use the Mavic a ton. We have played with the Inspire 2 as well. We've tried them all. I mean, since the beginning, we've done all the DJI products. So when, like what you were saying, when this first came out, we were kind of confused. Like, what is this for? Because we really like the Mavic. It does have the small form factor, a little bit better performance. But what I came to conclude after using this for a little bit and seeing other people use it, I'd say this is for people who are not necessarily power users for drones. Somebody who just wants a drone to have as a fun recreational tool, to take some fun pictures, kind of like a, I don't know, cell phone camera or a small point and shoot camera to go out, so when you're out you can take pictures with your friends. The fact that you can actually use this without even using the remote, just let it take off, take a couple selfies, take a picture, and then go about your day. I think it's geared towards that type of person, not necessarily like a filmmaker, not necessarily like a hobbyist, somebody who just wants another fun way to capture memories, get some cool selfies and stuff like that.
So I 100% agree with that. I think that you nailed it. This is more of like a consumer, like family product. This isn't necessarily a professional level product.
Exactly.
And we'll get into some of those specs and details of why that is. Something else to keep in mind, the Fly More package for this is $6.99 right now. And right now the Fly More package for the DJI Mavic is $12.99. So that's a pretty significant jump.
Yeah.
You know, so
basically double.
Yeah, and this isn't a comparison video, so we don't want to talk a ton about the, the other products, but let's just get into this specific product. What's new about this? What's exciting? Why would somebody purchase this?
So obviously the form factor is the big one that you notice right off the bat. It is very, very small. And a lot of people argue that the Mavic is equally as small, and to a certain extent that's true. The Mavic does fold up and it is very small, but the Mavic is a more girthy quad. It weighs a lot more. This thing with the battery in is super lightweight, so you can easily toss this in your backpack. It also seems pretty rugged. There's not as many moving parts on this as there is the Mavic.
And actually, it doesn't fold up at all, so that's something else to note.
Yep. And
something to consider, while it is incredibly small, and I know everybody says that, but it really is unbelievably small.
Yes. Smaller in person than when you see it on screen.
It is, and I mean, a business card just about covers it. Yeah. which is crazy. But something to consider is that in the carrying case that comes with it, the carrying case for the Spark is actually not any smaller than the carrying case for the Mavic. So as far as like footprint of what you're going to be carrying if you're traveling with it, it's pretty similar.
It is very similar, yes.
Well,
I would say it's lighter though. It is lighter. The batteries are lighter. The quad itself is lighter. The Mavic is a pretty heavy bag when you got a bunch of batteries in there and the quad itself. Well, and while we're talking about the Mavic, just real quick, a lot of you are probably wondering, like, what is the difference? Why do you pay so much more for the Mavic? And there's a couple. There's many reasons. A couple of the main ones though is, first off, battery life. Your flight time is almost double on the Mavic. You can get 25 to 30 minutes on the Mavic, whereas this is only about 15 to 16, right. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're actually flying a craft in the air, you're flying something through the air like a bird, that's a long time. That's a pretty long flight. In fact, like the mini race quads that we mentioned earlier, those only fly for about 3 minutes at a time. And it's an exhilarating 3 minutes, but 15, 16 minutes is actually pretty good. So that's one thing that's different between the Mavic and the Spark. The other thing is the camera. The camera on the Mavic will have 3 axes of stabilization, so rock solid stable footage. And it's also a more capable camera. You can do things like 4K, you can do 60 frames a second. You have a little bit more control there on the camera realm. But other than that, I'd say the Mavic is a little bit more sportier when you want to fly it fast and stuff like that. It goes about 40 miles an hour, so this isn't quite as fast, but I was actually surprised by how fast it was. But anyways, those are the main things between the two. That's the reason why you're actually paying more for the Mavic, so keep that in mind.
So something I'm hesitant to even mention, but I do think it's important, is that the Spark just looks friendly.
Yes.
And so when I say it's the best drone for most people, part of that is it's more pleasing to look at. It looks friendly. Honestly, the Mavic looks sweet, but it also looks pretty aggressive.
Yeah, and for those of you that might sound crazy too, the reason why that's important is because when you go to a park or when you go to a public place and you go pull out a drone, typically if there's other people there, majority of them have never seen a drone before, or a lot of them don't even know what a drone is. Some people don't even know this technology exists. So it can make people a little bit uneasy, especially if you're flying like a little race quad that sounds like a blender flying through the air and it's going 70 miles an hour. You're going to get a lot more looks and a lot more potentially angry people flying something like that compared to this.
And we have, faced some skepticism from public, if you're flying in a park or at the beach or whatever. I just think it's helpful to have drones that look like they're happy. So let's get into specs a little bit.
Sure. So, well, first off, this has all of your standard DJI, whatever you want to call it, smart drone features as far as like GPS. So it's going to pick up satellites. It's going to hold its position based on GPS. It has things like altitude hold. So it's actually using a barometer in there to hold its altitude. So when you let go of the sticks, this thing is going to lock and it's going to stay right there until you tell it to do something, or it runs out of battery, in which case it'll come back and land right where it took off. So every time you take it off, it recognizes that as its home point, so it always knows where to go to come back home.
And I guess a brief summarized version of that is that it flies exactly like you would think a DJI product would.
Yeah.
I know that there were some concerns with people with the video signal and operating off of Wi-Fi. We will get to that. But it flies exactly like you think a DJI product should.
It just works like you would expect it to. It flies very, very nice. Now, a lot of you, if you're looking for your first drone and you're looking at DJI and maybe some other things, a lot of people often are either drawn to a DJI quad or a race quad that you see on like ESPN nowadays and stuff like that. Like, which one is the right one for me? Well, the big difference is that a race quad actually takes quite a significant skill set to be able to fly. This, and all DJI products, takes little to no effort or skill to fly. It's very, very intuitive. It's kind of like semi-autonomous, like it assists you in flying. So it's not even necessarily like you're flying something, it's more like you're pushing a camera around in space.
Which is great for most people because most people are going to be buying this for its camera. Exactly. It's a flying camera.
Exactly, and DJI, that's how they design their products. They design their products so you don't have to worry about flying. You don't have to worry about that learning curve. You can focus on getting your shot, getting your pictures, getting your video, bringing it back down in one piece. Don't ever have to worry about crashing. In fact, when DJI quads first came out, that was the one thing that I actually struggled with, is just like having 100% trust in the quad. You don't need to worry about it falling out of the sky. Whereas back in the day when we were building quads out of wooden booms and stuff like that, there's normally a pretty good percentage that there's a chance that something could go wrong and you're gonna fall out of the sky. With DJI quads, you don't need to worry about that because there's no setup, there's no tuning, there's nothing. It just flies perfect right out of the box.
And one caveat to that is something that we noticed when we got the Mavic is you do get those high wind warnings. So when you're in 13, 14, 15 mile an hour winds, that's kind of the very upper end of what you're gonna want to be flying this in. Now, I don't know how many scenarios there are. I mean, the Phantom 4 is rock solid in 20 mile per hour winds.
Yeah.
You're just not gonna have that kind of experience. That just comes with lighter weight and a smaller machine. There's just less heft there to keep it more stable. Probably one thing that's a little bit of a bummer as far as specs wise is it has a 1080p resolution at
30 frames a second.
30 frames per second, which is, it's not great. We're used to 4K on everything. But I just want to show you, just like, look how small that camera is. It's probably out of focus.
And it also has a two-axis gimbal on there too. But as far as like the 1080p 30 frames per second, for us, like doing a lot of editing and cutting up and slowing footage down and whatnot, 1080p 30 frames a second isn't ideal. But for somebody who's just going to take a picture or a video and put it on their Instagram, you're not going to notice a difference.
And the vast majority of people in defense of 1080p are uploading in 1080p.
Yeah.
4K, is cool and it gives you some more flexibility when you're editing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, 1080p is what everyone's uploading in. We've been shooting in 4K for how long, and we still upload in 1080p.
Yeah. Yeah, 4K, it is technically more resolution, and it is also the future. But right now, it basically gives you a little bit more bandwidth when you're editing. It gives you a little bit more capability when you're editing to push in and stuff like that. And then if you do happen to have a $5,000 4K TV, that's cool too, but not everyone does. And 1080p still looks great on those as well.
Something else to note is it does have a 2-axis gimbal on it, which again, in the form factor is just unbelievable that they packed a 2-axis gimbal in there. What is the the overall like controls of the camera. Is that similar to what they would expect, like with the Mavic?
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at the controller here, the controller actually is very similar to the Mavic. It's actually the same like kind of design with a few minor different features. It doesn't have the built-in lit display,
right.
But it does have the gimbal control right here. And you mentioned the 2-axis gimbal. It only is stabilized on the pitch and roll axis, but I do believe that they do have a digital stabilization on the yaw. I was expecting the yaw to be a little bit more twitchy than it was, but when I saw the footage, I was actually really impressed at how well it does at stabilizing. It's the same kind of stabilization that's in a lot of smartphones and stuff like that. It's actually taking a bigger image and then cropping in and using those extra pixels to stabilize it to take some of the shake out of it. But the controller, yeah, it has 2 gimbals. I personally prefer to use the controller because this does actually have the option to fly it with a cell phone. So it's the same concept. The only difference, instead of having a tactile feel to these gimbals, you're actually using gimbals on a touchscreen. So you can't really actually feel what they're doing. For me, it's it's much more difficult to fly. If you're looking to get a little bit more precision flying, quite a bit more precision shots with your video and your pictures, I definitely recommend going up to the controller. But that's not to say that you can't use gesture controls or the cell phone to get some great selfies, because it does work too.
I think a critical piece of information that some people may not understand when they're evaluating the Spark versus something else is video link. So the video link is actually through Wi-Fi, which typically we've hated in the past, and we've had other drones that have come across our desks that have connected via Wi-Fi, just because there's so many better technologies out there.
Yes.
There's the very low latency, very high resolution video protocols out there, like the Lightbridge and OcuSync,
yes.
That the Mavic runs on. We've just been so impressed with those, of how clear it is and how far you can go. It's amazing. So the caveat is it does operate off of Wi-Fi. However, I will say is where I think other drones have fallen short in the Wi-Fi category is that they've only connected to Wi-Fi on your phone. Now, while this does connect to your phone and it does use a Wi-Fi signal, it is actually using the Wi-Fi signal of the controller. So you don't pair your phone directly to the drone like you do with most Wi-Fi drones. You actually pair it to the controller, and the controller is sending a much stronger Wi-Fi signal than your phone is capable of. So that while the range is decreased quite a bit actually from something like Lightbridge or Oculus, it's still the same technology, it's still Wi-Fi. It is a much stronger signal than you would be used to with maybe some other Wi-Fi drones. Yeah, and I think that's what confuses some people about the Spark, is actually nothing plugs into your phone.
Yeah.
Unlike the Mavic, where it actually is plugged directly into your phone, there's nothing that connects it, so it just sits in there, but you do pair your phone to the controller, then the controller talks to the drone.
So in other words, you're going to get a little bit more range than a cell phone, but still not as much as some of the other digital frequencies.
Plus, it looks like an ant face. So just like the Mavic, your phone does go in this controller. You also have the ability to select all of the same settings that you have with some of the limitations, such as 1080p. But you have all of the same camera control. So the camera controls are the same. It's just what you're used to in the DJI app. And for those of you that aren't as familiar with DJI products, or if maybe this is your first DJI product, the camera controls are really nice. They're really nicely laid out. The menus are obvious. They make sense. And the nice thing is you don't have to mess with those menus a whole lot if you don't want to.
Yeah.
The default settings, so if you just want to press that red record button and just go up in the air, you're going to get decent video.
Yeah.
And if you're more used to cameras and you're more used to looking at some of those camera settings, you can refine that shot that much more.
Yeah, I think of it as it's very, very similar to operating a cell phone camera, both in quality but also in the performance. It has a full auto mode, and it does have a limited amount of manual control that you can adjust on most like iPhones or Galaxies and stuff like that. So there is that adjustment there if you want it. Now this does also have the downward facing sensors and a forward facing sensor for obstacle avoidance.
Yes, it does have front facing obstacle avoidance. It's not like the Phantoms though, that have pretty much every way obstacle avoidance.
Yeah, the Phantom 4 Pro now has obstacle avoidance on all sides. So in other words, if you're flying towards an object, it's going to stop before it hits it. Now if you're flying sideways towards an object, it's going to hit it still. So you got to keep that in mind. And then it has the downward facing sensors to help you with landing. You'll notice when you bring these down for a land, you basically just pin the stick down and it will come and it senses the ground, stops, and then it does a nice soft landing.
So I think the biggest criticism of the Spark so far has been the very well promoted gesture control. I think is what some people have been frustrated with, is that there's been a disparity between the marketing for the gesture control and how the gesture control actually operates. And so that's something that I would have to agree with. When we first got this out of the box, I tried to play around with gesture control. Now granted, I'm not a manual guy. I don't really watch anything before I try messing with stuff. So some of that might be on me. And also we've heard that they've improved some things through software with the gesture control. So what do you say we just kind of cut to our quick experience real quick of just playing with it?
Love it, let's do it.
So I've previously had a bad experience with gesture control and realized that it was actually 100% my fault. So to use gesture control, when you have a brand new Spark, you actually have to go into a separate menu and you can actually enable gesture control.
Okay.
So you enable a couple things: the palm landing, the palm takeoff, and then palm control. And those are like the cool Star Wars ones that everyone wants to do.
Yeah.
And so that was like the first thing I went to do when I got the Spark.
Yeah,
and it didn't work.
So there's a couple different controls that you can do, and the first one is the palm takeoff, like you were saying, and you just tap the button twice while it's on in your hand. You have to hold it there for a little bit, and it does a facial recognition thing. And once it realizes your face is right there and it's safe to take off, it'll take off and hover right in front of you. From there, you can do things like portrait, which is where you do the classic camera box thing like this. You got to make sure you hold it though. It's kind of awkward. You got to hold it for like 3 seconds, which 3 like real seconds is quite a bit of time. The other modes that you have is, I forget the technical term, but you wave at the thing and it goes up and away from you a little bit. So if you want to bring it out a little bit further from you, you just wave. Now again, you have to wave for 3 seconds. So you're going to be standing there in the middle of the park like we were, just waving, just waving for a little bit, but then it will fly up and away at a specified distance. It also puts it into a follow mode. So from there, you can actually start walking or running and it will actually follow.
I tried to trick it, it didn't work.
There you go. And then the last one, I believe it's called beckon, and that is when you hold your hands up like a Y, and you hold it for 3 seconds, and then it will come back towards you a little bit. And
so both a meter off the ground and a meter in front of you. So if you're having a lot of trouble with gesture control, or if you're just having a frustrating experience, it's just not taking your commands, something to consider is when the sun's very high and overhead and there's not many clouds, I think the sensor has trouble reading some of the finer movements. And so that's something to maybe try underneath, a little bit of cloud cover or some shade for some trees worked really well for me. Just note that if you're having a frustrating experience, you're probably not alone in that. And that maybe try it on a day with a little bit of cloud cover or a little bit of shade for some trees. So if you watched this far, first off, you're crazy. Second of all, I think that this deserves just kind of like wrap up comments of just kind of what our evaluation of it. My evaluation after being skeptical about it, just because of how much we love the Mavic, is that it's probably the best drone for most people. Yeah. My mom has a Spark.
Yes. I was just gonna say that. I thought you got one.
I have friends of my parents have a Spark, and I've taught them how to use it and how to fly it. And it really does work for most people.
Yes.
If you don't need, 4K, if you don't need some of the more, advanced features that's either the Phantom line or the Mavic line have, the Spark is going to work for you.
Yeah.
If you want to get photos of your family, you want to take a picture of your house, if you just want to tell people you have a drone, I mean, this is a great option.
It is.
And also, I think like most DJI products, it's going to hold its value pretty well.
Yeah.
So if you buy it and you have it for a year and you want to give it away or you want to sell it to somebody, the risk is fairly low, and that's at the highest price, which is $699, which I'm sure, in the future, if you're watching this, a year from now, it's probably lower than that.
Yeah, also, I'm sure there's already used ones and refurbished ones on the market already.
Right.
But yeah, that being said, I'd agree. I'd say it is, for most people, it's made to capture memories and share moments that, keep them forever, basically. If you're just a normal person that wants to have a drone experience and have a way to capture aerial memories of your friends and family, Spark is the way to go. Save the money. Unless, like I said, you're a power user, then you might want to look into the Mavic.
Yeah, so I think that the only downside and the only reason that I might rate this, maybe like a 8.5 out of 10, is just because some of those features that were so heavily promoted were off to a rough start.
Yeah.
I think that you'll be able to see in our experience that we're able to replicate more of what it was proposed that it could do. But it does take a little bit of fiddling. You are going to need to read your manual. You are going to need to know how to use those features. They aren't maybe as intuitive as people hoped they would be. Well, guys, we hope we enjoyed watching. This video was specifically for somebody that says, I'm looking to buy a Spark. What is the information I need to know? Hopefully we covered that for you. If we missed something, please leave in the comments, or if you have a question, leave a comment. We'll try to get back to you on that.
Yep.
Meanwhile, happy flying, guys, and thanks for watching.
Yep. And make sure you guys subscribe too. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, make sure you do so. Also hit the little bell next to it. Turns out that on YouTube, subscribing isn't enough anymore. You have to hit that little bell. That'll notify you every time we come out with a video. And we do so about 4 or 5 times a week, which is a lot. So keep up, hit that bell. Also, we'll put a link down below to some of the other DJI products. We've done the Inspire 1, Inspire 2, we did the Mavic, we did the Phantom 3, Phantom 4. We've done a lot of DJI products.
Yeah.
Well, check the links below if you're interested in those, because you can still get a lot of those drones. Some of them brand new, and some of them you can find them used online. So check the links below, and we'll see you guys next time.